Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Pavek After Dark, War of the Worlds. My name is Gwendolyn Nystrom. I'm the president and CEO here at the Pavek Museum, and we are so excited to have you here tonight after dark and look forward to having a great show. The Pavek Museum tells a story. It highlights the history of electronic communication. It tells the story of innovation and technological evolution that led to the devices here around you in the museum and in your pockets. The science that makes the gizmos happen as well. We do this through interactive exhibits, community outreach, and educational programming. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Pavek Museum, our most popular program is called the Broadcast Experience. It allows students of all ages, including adults, the opportunity to create their own live radio show. Other popular programs include the Electromagnetism Experience and Podcast Camp. So if you're not familiar with us, check out our website. I know some of you are guests of people who are familiar with the museum, and we want everyone to know more about us. We've got a number of projects in the works and look forward to welcoming you back in 2024 with some new education programs. But switching gears, you might be wondering, why War of the Worlds? Why? In 1988, when the Pavek Museum opened to the public, it intentionally aligned its opening with the 50th anniversary of the War of the Worlds broadcast, the original broadcast. And in order to honor the Pavek Museum's 35th anniversary this year, we wanted to pay homage to both the museum and this important historical broadcast by bringing it to life with Minnesota Broadcaster Hall of Fame members to showcase their talents and create a unique experience for you, our audience. Tonight, you'll see the talents of these illustrious folks showcased. There will be moments in the show where you, the audience, will be asked to participate. So when you see a cue card that says "Scream," please comply. For this evening's performance, we had a slight change in the lineup. Don Shelby was unable to make it. He's been ill, and we wish him all the best in his recovery, so he is not here tonight. But we have a lot of great folks who are waiting in the wings over here, and without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Freddie Bell, Eric Escala, Dave Lee, Nancy Nelson, Patrick Royce, Tim Russell, Kathy Werzer, Foley artist Catherine Horowitz, and Foley assistant Max Raymer.
The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early days of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than humanity's and yet as mortal as its own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that to our minds, as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The war scare was over. More people were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crosley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
For the next 24 hours, not much change in temperature. A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is being reported over Manitoba and Ontario, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over Minnesota, bringing a forecast of rain accompanied by strong winds. Maximum temperature 66, minimum 48. The weather report is coming to you from the Government Weather Bureau. We now take you to the Meridian Room in the Leamington Hotel in downtown Minneapolis, where you'll be entertained by the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Leamington Hotel in Minneapolis, we bring you the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Ramon Raquello leads off with La Comparsita.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News Service. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Larson of the Eagle Creek Observatory, located in Baylor Regional Park in Carver County near Norwood, Young America, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Visiting Professor Penelope Pearson of the observatory at Princeton, who's on sabbatical at Eagle Lake Observatory, confirms Larson's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Leamington Hotel, situated in downtown Minneapolis.
Ladies and gentlemen, following on that news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we have arranged an interview with noted astronomer Professor Pearson, who will give us her views on this event. In a few moments, we will take you to the Eagle Lake Observatory in Carver County near Norwood, Young America. We return you until then to the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra.
We're now ready to take you to the Eagle Lake Observatory, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Pearson, famous astronomer. We take you now to the Eagle Lake Observatory, located in Baylor Regional Park in Carver County near Norwood, Young America.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips, speaking to you from the observatory at Eagle Lake. I'm standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanism of this huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Pearson stands directly above me on a small platform peering through a giant lens. I ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides her ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Pearson may be interrupted by telephone or other communications during this period. She is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea, transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be the point nearest the Earth, in opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Pearson?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips, although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced, as a scientist, that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars?
I'd say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for those gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance. Thank you. Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Someone has just handed Professor Pearson a message. While she reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory near Norwood, Young America, where we are interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Pearson. One moment, please. Professor Pearson has passed me a message, which he has just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read you a wire addressed to Professor Pearson from Dr. Gray of the National History Museum, New York, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Norwood, Young America. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular point is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Eagle Lake, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We are returning you now to our Minneapolis studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News Service, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morris of McGill University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories.
And now nearer home comes a special announcement from observers in the West Metro. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on an apple farm in the neighborhood of Waconia, Minnesota, about 36 miles west of our location in downtown Minneapolis. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Duluth.
We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and we'll have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word description as soon as he can reach there from Eagle Lake Observatory near Norwood, Young America. In the meantime, we take you to the St. Paul Hotel, where Bobby Millette and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music. We now take you to Waconia, Minnesota.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again at the Wilmuth Farm in Waconia, Minnesota. Professor Pearson and myself made the 10 miles from Eagle Lake in 10 minutes. Well, I hardly know where to begin to paint for you a word picture of this strange scene before my eyes, like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. Yes, I guess that's the thing directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree. It must have struck on its way down. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. It has a diameter of... What would you say, Professor Pearson?
What's that?
What would you say? What is the diameter?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is sort of yellowish white. Curious spectators now are pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of my line of vision. Would you mind standing to one side, sir?
What do you do?
While the policemen are pushing the crowd back, here's Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm here. He may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Wilmoth, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember of this rather unusual visitor that dropped in your backyard? Step closer, please.
Oh, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmoth.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I was listening to the radio.
Yeah, closer and louder, please.
Pardon me, sorry.
Yeah, louder, please, and
Okay,
closer.
Yes, sir. I was listening to the Good Neighbor, and I was kind of drowsing. That professor was talking about Mars, so I kind of half dozing off, and
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth, then what happened?
Well, as I was saying, I was listening to the radio kind of halfway.
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth, and then you saw something.
Well, not first off. No, I heard something. Actually.
And what did you hear?
Well, it was kind of a hissing sound, like kind of like a 4th of July rocket or something like that. Yeah.
Then what?
Well, I turned my head out the window, and I would have swore I was asleep and dreaming. It was amazing.
Yes.
I seen a kind of greenish streak, and then zingo, something smacked the ground. It knocked me clear out of my chair is what it did.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmoth?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I mean, yeah, I reckon I was kind of riled.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmoth. Thank you.
I'll tell you some more if you'd like.
No.
Okay.
That's quite all right. That's plenty. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm where this thing has fallen. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in a field behind us. Police are trying to rope off the roadway leading to the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. Cars' headlights throw an enormous spot on the pit where the object's half buried. Some of the more daring souls are now venturing near the edge. Their silhouettes stand out against the metal sheen.
Get out of the way.
One man wants to touch the thing. He's having an argument with a policeman. The policeman wins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but now it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you caught it already on your radio. Listen. Do you hear it? It's a curious humming sound that seems to come from inside the object. I'll move the microphone nearer. Now we're not more than 25 feet away. Can you hear it now? Oh, Professor Pearson.
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Can you tell us the meaning of that scraping noise inside the thing?
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I see. Do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial, not found on this Earth. Friction with the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. This thing is smooth and, as you can see, of cylindrical shape.
Just a minute. Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. The end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw. The thing must be hollow.
Oh, God.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Someone's crawling out of the hollow top. Someone or something. I can see peering out of the black hole two luminous discs. Are they eyes?
It's a nightmare.
It might be a face. It might be. Good heavens! Something's wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one, and another. They look like tentacles to me. There. I can see the thing's body. It's large as a bear, and it glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent. The mouth is V-shaped, with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems weighed down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's raising up. The crowd falls back now. They've seen plenty. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I can take a new position. Hold on, will you please? I'll be right back in a minute.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmuth Farm, Waconia, Minnesota. We now return you to Carl Phillips in Waconia.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I on? Ladies and gentlemen, here I am. Back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmuth's farm. From here, I get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk, as long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit, about 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. We can't quite see. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yeah, it is. Now they've parted. The professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. A flag of truce? If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait, something's happening. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Good Lord, they're turning into flame. Now the whole field's caught fire. The woods, the barns, the gas tanks of automobiles, it's spreading everywhere. It's coming this way, about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Waconia. Evidently, there is some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from Professor Shelby speaking at a dinner of the Minnesota Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. We now continue with our piano interlude.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been handed a message that came in from Waconia by telephone. Just a moment. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of Waconia, their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you will hear will be that of Brigadier General Montgomery Smith, commander of the state militia in St. Paul.
I've been requested by the governor of Minnesota to place the counties of Carver and Hennepin as far west as Norwood, Young America, and east of Minneapolis under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by state or military authorities. 4 companies of state militia are proceeding from St. Paul to Waconia and will aid in the evacuation of homes within the range of military operations. Thank you.
You have just been listening to General Montgomery Smith, commanding the state militia in St. Paul. In the meantime, further details of the catastrophe at Waconia are coming in. The strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back into their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of the firefighters to recover the bodies and extinguish the fire. Combined fire departments of Carver County are fighting the flames which menace the entire countryside. We have been unable to establish any contact with our mobile unit at Waconia but we hope to be able to return you there at the earliest possible moment. But in the meantime, we take one moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness to the tragedy. Professor Pearson has been located at a farmhouse near Waconia, where she has established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, she will give you her explanation of the calamity. And the next voice you hear will be that of Professor Pearson, brought to you by a direct wire. Professor Pearson.
Of the shaken creatures in the rocket cylinder at Waconia, I can give you no authoritative information either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture some explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own. It's my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
Professor Pearson, thank you so very much, Professor Pearson. Ladies and gentlemen, here's a bulletin from rural Waconia. It's a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carl Phillips has been identified in a Waconia medical facility.
Now here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C., the Office of the Director of the National Red Cross, reporting that 10 units of Red Cross emergency workers have been assigned to the headquarters of the state militia stationed outside Waconia, Minnesota.
In more breaking news, here's another bulletin from state police. The fires at Waconia and vicinity are now under control. Scouts report all quiet in the pit, no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special statement from Mr. Harry McDonald, Vice President in charge of radio operations.
We have received a request from the state militia in Minneapolis to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facilities. In view of the gravity of the situation and believing that radio has a responsibility to serve in the public interest at all times, we are turning over our facilities to the state militia.
And so we take you now to the field headquarters of the state militia near Waconia, Minnesota.
This is Captain Lansing of the Signal Corps, attached to the state militia now engaged in military operations in the vicinity of Waconia. Situation arising from the reported presence of certain individuals of unidentified nature is now under complete control. The cylindrical object, which lies in a pit directly below our position, is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry, without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed with rifles and machine guns. So all cause for alarm, if such cause ever existed, is now entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their heads above the pit. I can see their hiding place plainly in the glare of the searchlights here. With all their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Anyway, it's kind of an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniforms crossing back and forth in front of the lights. It almost looks like a real war. There appears to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering the Barant Lake, probably fire started by campers. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deploying, I see, on the left flank. A quick thrust, and this will all be over. And so, now, sorry, wait a minute. No, I see something on top of the cylinder. No, that's nothing but a shadow. Now, the troops are on the edge of the Wilmoth farm. 7,000 armed men closing in on an old metal tube. And so, wait, that wasn't a shadow. Something moving. This is solid metal. It's kind of a shield-like affair rising up out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. Well, it's standing on its legs. This thing is actually rearing up on some sort of metal framework. Now, Now it's reaching above the trees and the searchlights are on it. Hold on. Up.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our own eyes lead us to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Minnesota farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which is taking place near Waconia seems to soon be one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by any army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. At this time, 120 known survivors, the rest strewn over the battle area from Waconia to Hutchinson, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster or burned to cinders by his heat ray. The monster now appears in control of much of the middle section of Minnesota and has effectively cut the state through its center. Communication lines are down from Minneapolis to most of western Minnesota. Railroad tracks are torn, and service from Minneapolis to the West Coast is discontinued except routing some of the trains through Mankato and Rochester. Highways to the north, south, and west are clogged with frantic human traffic. Police and Army reserves are unable to control the mad flight. By morning, the fugitives will have swelled Stillwater, Mankato, and Duluth. It's estimated to twice their normal population, and at this time, martial law prevails throughout Minnesota. We now take you to Washington for a special broadcast on the national emergency. The Secretary of the Interior.
Citizens of the nation, I shall try to not conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country, nor the concern of your government in protecting the lives and property of its people. However, I wish to impress upon you, private citizens and public officials, all of you, the urgent need of calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a comparatively small area, and we may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
You have just heard from the Secretary of the Interior speaking from Washington. Bulletins too numerous to read are piling up here in the studio. We are informed the central portion of Minnesota is blacked out from radio communications due to the effect of the heat ray upon the power lines and electrical equipment.
But this is a special bulletin now from New York. Cables received from English, French, and German scientific bodies offering assistance. Astronomers report continued gas outbursts at regular intervals on the planet Mars. Majority voice opinion that enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. Attempts made to locate Professor Pearson of Princeton, who has observed Martians at close range, and it is feared she has been lost in recent battle. Minnesota Air Guard observation planes report 3 Martian machines visible among the treetops, moving north towards St. Cloud with population fleeing ahead of them. Heat ray not in use, although advancing at express train speed. Invaders pick their way carefully. They seem to be making conscious effort to avoid destruction of cities and the countryside. However, they stop to uproot power lines, bridges, and railroad tracks. Their apparent objective: to crush resistance, paralyze communication, and disorganize human society.
Army field pieces are proceeding from Camp Ripley Air Base to blow up second invading unit before cylinder can be opened and the fighting machine rigged. They're taking up position in the Alexandria Lakes area.
Another bulletin now from the Minnesota Air Guard. Observation planes report enemy machines, now 3 in number, increasing speed northward, kicking over houses and trees in their evident haste to form a conjunction with their allies south of Waconia. Machines also sighted by a telephone operator east of Melrose, within 10 miles of Sauk Center.
Here now is a bulletin from Camp Ripley. Fleet of Army bombers with heavy explosives flying south in pursuit of the enemy. Scouting planes act as guides. They keep their speeding enemy in sight. Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we've run special wires to the artillery line in adjacent villages to give you direct reports in the zone of the advancing enemy.
Army bombing plane B-843 off Buffalo, Minnesota. Lieutenant Voigt commanding 8 bombers. Reporting to Commander Fairfax Wold Chamberlain Field. This is Voigt reporting to Commander Fairfax Wold Chamberlain Field. Enemy tripod machines now in sight, reinforced by 3 machines from the Morris cylinder, 6 altogether. 1 machine already crippled, believed hit by shell from Army gun in Alexandria Lakes area. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog hanging close to the earth of extreme density, nature unknown. No sign of heat ray. Enemy now turns east, crossing Mississippi River into the Monticello marshes. Another straddles the Minneapolis Skyway. Evident objective is the Twin Cities. They're pushing down a high-tension power station. The machines are close together now, and we're ready to attack. Planes circling, ready to strike. 1,000 yards, and we'll be over the first. 800 yards. 600. 400. 200. There they go. The giant arm raised. Green flash. They're spraying us with flame. 2,000 feet. Engines are giving out. No chance to release bombs. Only one thing left. Drop on them. Plane and all. We're diving on the first one. Now the engine's gone. 8.
This is Monticello calling home and field. Monticello, Minnesota calling home and field. Come in, please.
This is Holman Field. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines over Minnesota Flats. Engines incapacitated by heat ray. All crashed. 1 enemy machine destroyed. Enemy now discharging heavy black smoke in the direction up.
This just in from the Minnesota Air National Guard. Warning, poisonous black smoke pouring in from Mississippi River marshes, reaching Highway 10. Gas masks appear useless. Urging population to move into open spaces. Automobiles use highways 7, 12, and 61. Avoid congested areas. Smoke now spreading over Brooklyn Boulevard.
I'm speaking now from the roof of the Fauché Tower, Minneapolis. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as the Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands have moved out along the roads to the north. Highway 10 still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges in the Twin Cities metro, hopelessly jammed. All communication with Wold Chamberlain Airport closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our Army wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here till the end. People are holding services below in the cathedral. Now I look down at the Mississippi River. All manner of boats overloaded with fleeing population pulling out from the docks. Streets are all jammed. Noise in the crowds like New Year's Eve in the city. Wait a minute. Enemy now in sight above the Minnesota Bohemian Flats. 5 great machines. The first one is crossing the river. I can see it from here. Wading the Mississippi like a man wading through a brook.
The bulletin just handed to me reads, Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. 1 outside Buffalo, 1 in Chicago, St. Louis, seem to be timed and spaced.
Now the first machine is reaching the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city. His steel, cowlish head is even with the skyscrapers. He waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on the city's west side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets can see it now. They're running towards the river, thousands of them dropping like rats. And now the smoke is spreading faster. It's reached downtown Minneapolis. People trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke is crossing 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 100 yards away. It's
2X2L calling CQ, 2X2L calling CQ, 2X2L calling CQ, Wold Chamberlain Field. Is anyone there on the air? Isn't anyone on the air? Is anyone there? 2X2L.
As I set down these notes on paper, I'm obsessed by the thought that I may be the last living person on Earth. I've been hiding in this empty house near Waconia, cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. All that happened before the arrival of these monstrous creatures in the world now seems part of another life. I look down at my blackened hands, my torn shoes, my tattered clothes, and I try to connect them with a professor at Eagle Lake near the observatory who on the night of October 30th glimpsed through her telescope an orange splash of light on a distant planet. My husband, my colleagues, my students, my books, my observatory, my world, where are they? Did they ever exist? What day is it? Do days have weeks or days without calendars? Does time pass when there are no human hands left to wind the clocks? Writing down my daily life, I tell myself, shall preserve human history. But to write, I must live. And to live, I must eat. I find moldy bread in the kitchen and an orange not too spoiled to swallow. I keep watch at the window. From time to time, I catch sight of a Martian above the black smoke. The smoke still holds the house in its black coil. But at length, there is a hissing sound, and suddenly, I see a Martian mounted on his machine, spraying the air with a jet of steam as if to dissipate the smoke. I watch in the corner as his huge metal legs nearly brush against the house. Exhausted by terror, I fall asleep. It's morning. Morning. Sun streams in the window. The black cloud of gas has lifted, and the scorched meadows to the north look as though a black snowstorm has passed over them. I venture from the house. I make my way to a road, no traffic. Here and there, a wrecked car, baggage overturned, a blackened skeleton. I push on north. I keep careful watch. I have seen these Martians feed. I must keep alive. 2 days later, I wander in a vague northerly direction through a desolate world. Finally, I notice a living creature, a small red squirrel in a beech tree. I stare at him in wonder. He stares back at me. I believe at that moment the animal and I shared the same emotion, the joy of finding another living being. I push on north. I find dead cows in a brackish field beyond the charred ruins of a dairy. Next day, I come to a vaguely familiar, yet unlikely, because its buildings in this city are strangely dwarfed and leveled off as if a giant hand sliced off its highest towers with a sweep of his hand. I reached the outskirts. I found St. Paul, undemolished but humbled by some whim of the advancing Martians. Presently, with an odd feeling of being watched, I caught sight of something crouching in a doorway. I made a step toward it, and it rose up and became a man armed with a large knife.
Stop. Where did you come from?
I come from many places. A long time ago, Princeton, and a few days ago, Norwood, Young America.
Norwood, Young America, that's next to Waconia, isn't it?
Yes.
Waconia, there's no food over there. There's only food for one. This is my country, all the way from the town down to the river. There's only food for me. What are you doing here?
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for people.
What was that?
Only a
Did you hear
bird.
something just then?
Only a bird. A live bird.
Yeah, you get to know that birds have shadows these days. Say, we're in the open here. Let's crawl into this doorway and talk.
Have you seen any Martians?
Yeah, not really. They've gone over to Mankato. At night, the sky is alive with their lights, as if people were still living in it. By daylight, you can't see them. 5 days ago, a couple of them carried something big across the flats from the airport. I believe they're learning how to fly.
Fly?
Yeah, fly.
Then it's all over with humanity. Stranger, there's still you and me, 2 of us left.
They got themselves in charge, that's for sure. They wrecked the greatest country in the world. These green stars, they're probably falling somewhere every night. They've only lost one machine. There isn't anything to do. We're done. We're licked.
Where were you? You're in a uniform.
Yeah, what's left of it. I was in the militia, the National Guard. It wasn't any war, though, more than a war between men and ants.
And we're the eatable ants. I found that out. What will they do with us?
I've thought it all out. Right now, they're trying to catch us. We're wanted. The Martians only has to go a few miles to get a crowd on the run. But they won't keep doing that. They'll begin catching us systematic-like, keeping the best and storing us in cages and things. They aren't done with us yet.
They're not done with us yet, not begun even?
They have not begun. All that's happened so far is because we don't have the sense enough to keep quiet, bothering them with guns and stuff, and losing our heads and rushing off in crowds. Now, instead of our rushing around blind, we've got to fix ourselves up according to the way things are now. Cities, nations, civilization, progress, it's all done.
But if that's so, what is there to live for?
Well, there won't be any more concerts for 1,000,000 years or so, that's for sure. And no nice little dinners at restaurants. If it's amusement you're after, I guess the game's up.
And what is there left?
Life, that's what. I want to live. Yeah, and so do you. We're not going to be exterminated. I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed and fattened and bred like an ox.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to, right under their feet, I got a plan. We men, as men, are finished. We don't know enough. We got to learn plenty before we've got a chance. And we've got to live and keep free while we learn. I've thought it all out, by the way.
Tell me the rest.
Okay, here's the rest. Well, it isn't all of us that were made for wild beasts, and that's what it's got to be. That's why I watched you. All these little office workers that used to live in these houses, they'd be no good. They haven't any stuff to them. They just used to run off to work. I've seen hundreds of them running wild to catch their bus in the morning for fear they'd get canned if they didn't show up, running back at night so they won't miss dinner, lives insured and a little invested in case of accidents, and on Sundays worried about the hereafter. The Martians will be a godsend for those people. Nice, roomy cages, good food, careful breeding, no worries. After a week or so chasing about the fields on empty stomachs, they'll come and be glad to be caught.
You've thought it all out, haven't you?
You betcha. And that isn't all. These Martians will make pets of some of us, train us to do tricks. Who knows? Get sentimental over the pet boy who grew up and had to be killed. And yeah, they'll train to hunt us too.
No, that's impossible. No human being is going to hunt another human.
Yes, they will. There's a man who'll do it gladly. It's one of them ever comes after me. Why?
In the meantime, you and I and others like us, where are we to live when the Martians own the Earth?
I've got it all figured out. We'll live underground. I've been thinking about the sewers. Under Minneapolis, St. Paul are miles and miles of them. The main ones are big enough for anybody. Then there's cellars, vaults, underground storerooms, railway tunnels. You begin to see, don't you? We'll get a bunch of strong men together. No weak ones. No weak ones. They're out.
And you meant me to go.
Well, I guess I gave you a chance, didn't I?
We won't quarrel about that. Go on.
Well, we got to make safe places for us to stay in, see? Get all the books we can, science books. That's where people like you come in, see? We'll raid the museums. We'll even get spies on the Martians. It may not be it may not be so much that we have to learn before. Just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their own fighting machines suddenly start off, heat waves right and left, and not a Martian in sight. Not a Martian in them. But men who have learned the way. How? It may even be in our time. Imagine having one of them lovely things with a heat ray, wide and free. We'd turn it on the Martians. We'd turn it on men. We'd bring everybody down to their knees.
That's your plan?
You and me, and a few more of us, we'd own the world.
I see.
Say, what's the matter? Where are you going?
Not to your world. Goodbye, stranger. After parting with the artilleryman, I came to a tunnel. Cautiously, I walked through it, and there again black powder and several bodies and an evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars of some of the houses. I walked in the direction of that strange powder, past silent shop windows displaying their mute wares to empty sidewalks, past the Fitzgerald Theater, silent, dark. I noticed models of 1939 motor cars in the showrooms facing empty streets. I watched a flock of blackbirds circling in the sky. Suddenly, I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine standing somewhere in the park, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. I climbed a small hill above the pond. From there, I could see, standing in a silent row, 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their great steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. Suddenly, my eyes were attracted to the immense flock of blackbirds that hovered directly over me. They circled to the ground, and there, before my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians, with the hungry birds pecking and tearing brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when their bodies were examined in the laboratories, it was found that they were killed by diseases and bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain after all humankind's defenses had failed by the humblest thing God put upon this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space, no life existed beyond this petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve. To them, and not to us, is the future ordained, perhaps. Weeks later, strange, it seems, to sit in my peaceful study in Eagle Lake Observatory, writing down this last chapter of the record begun at the deserted farm in Waconia. Strange to watch children playing in the streets. Strange to see young people strolling on the green, where the new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch the sightseers enter the museum where the disassembled parts of a Martian machine are kept on public view. Strange when I recall the time when I first saw it, bright and clean cut, hard and silent, under the dawn of that last great day.
Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying boo. Starting now, we couldn't TP all of your trees and egg all of your houses by tomorrow night, so we did the next best thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed CBS. You will be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it, that both institutions are still open for business. So, goodbye, everybody, and remember the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch. And if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.
Tonight, the Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations coast to coast have brought you The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, the 17th in its weekly series of dramatic broadcasts featuring Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the air. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Thank you. Max and Catherine on the sound effect.
You guys are great.
Keep clapping, everybody. With our cast, I'd like to introduce, this is Max Raymer, our live Foley assistant. Catherine Horowitz, our live Foley artist. Tim Russell.
Yay, Tim.